My entitled grandma, Martha, stole my birthday cake and sent me trash as a gift, but I broke into her house to get it back. This is the same Sarah who encountered a wild, entitled mother-in-law who later tried to kill her. Here, however, Sarah is talking about her grandmother, Martha, who is another entitled mother-in-law in her own right, and she's also wild. Well, since my first post was quite boring and drama-free, I thought I'd tell you the story of my parents, Emily and Robert's, wedding. This is both to show that my grandma Martha fits the entitled mother-in-law mold and to fuel our drama flames. I'm going to tell this from my mother Emily's perspective. She knows I'm doing this, so if you have any questions for her, she's willing to answer them, though she still doesn't want to create a Reddit account. So, a quick bit of context from my mother Emily's point of view. There's a 13-year age difference between my fiancé, James, now husband, married for 26 years, and me. Although we're both American-Scottish descendants, we first met in Australia when I was 19 and he was 32. James was divorced and living in Sydney, and I had moved there as a nurse. We met because his ex-in-laws, who are friends with my parents, told him I was coming to Australia and asked him to look after me. We started dating, and eventually, 6 years later, we moved back to the US, and he proposed to me. Story time. We wanted to get married in Australia. Well, I wanted to. My fiancé James didn't really care. I dreamed of marrying in front of the Sydney Harbour Bridge around October or September, followed by a nice dinner somewhere with a few friends and family. We knew that many of our friends and family back in the US wouldn't be able to afford the trip, not even in the next couple of years. So, we planned to have a big reception in the US, with my dress and everything. Also, for convenience, we decided to register our marriage in the US instead of Australia. This meant signing the papers once we returned from Australia. I had a good friend in Sydney whom I asked to be my maid of honor, and she started looking for an officiant and coordinating things from there. Once we had a date, we began planning our reception in the US. It was going to be a ceilidh at a hotel. For those who don't know, that's a traditional Scottish and Irish folk dance. The hotel provided pretty much everything, including the band, and the room had capacity for 400 people, which was more than enough, considering James's family was still in Australia. The reception was scheduled for 4 days after we planned to return from Australia. My mother Emily wanted absolutely nothing to do with the wedding. Every time the topic came up, she would subtly change the conversation or leave the room. She told everyone that I didn't want her involved, so James and I were dealing with flying monkeys left and right. She refused to save money for the trip to Australia, even when we offered to pay for her and my father Robert's flights. She tried to convince both James and me not to get married. She told us separately that the age difference was disturbing and embarrassing, and that James would cheat on me just as he had with his first wife. In reality, she had cheated on him. My father Robert was completely lost. He was very used to her passive-aggressive behavior, but not directed at something so significant. I'm not sure he even knew about many of the things she was saying. She even strongly implied to her flying monkeys that James was still married to his ex-wife, which was a lie, as he had been divorced for many years. I would leave most conversations with her in tears. My fiancé James was my rock. He shut her down as much as he could, and I regret not defending him as much as I should have. I was terrified to ask her for her guest list. My father Robert wouldn't have had a clue, so I couldn't ask him. Finally, James asked her who she wanted to invite to the reception, and she basically told him to shove the question where the sun don't shine and that no one would want to come anyway. He replied, "Perfect. Then we won't bother having such a large reception in the US. We'll get our refundable deposit back and just have a night out with our friends." She scoffed, and he left. About 2 months later, 4 months before the wedding, she came to me and announced she had sent out 400 invitations to her friends and family for the reception. She invited everyone from her boss to her hairdresser, yet still didn't invite my best friends or my coworkers. I couldn't believe it. For 18 months, she had been crapping all over this, to the point where we had almost decided to cancel part of the celebration. Now, not only had she sent out invitations, forcing us to go through with it, but she had used up the entire guest list capacity. The only thing keeping me sane besides James was that this wasn't the actual wedding she was messing with, just a reception a few days later. We would still have the wedding we wanted with the people we wanted. I contacted the venue we had originally booked for the reception and found out that my mother Emily had rebooked it and paid for everything. The person I spoke with told me that my mother had spun a sob story about us canceling because we couldn't afford such a beautiful reception. So, my mother Emily had decided to surprise us by redoing all the plans and paying for it herself. This was where the money she'd been spending to avoid going to Australia had gone. Sounds great, right? She didn't realize she had been a witch and this was her way of making it up to us, did she? Not even close. James and I went straight to my parents' house to find out what was going on. She claimed this was the only way for her to have a say in the wedding and yelled that we should be more grateful and that she was giving up her wedding anniversary for us. Excuse me? Her wedding anniversary was 3 weeks before we were supposed to fly to Australia. The reception was supposed to be more than 6 weeks after her anniversary. But no. Since she had sent out the invitations without any input from James or me, we hadn't seen what date she had put, nor did it occur to us to confirm the date with the venue at that point. After James yelled at her for a while, I cried, and she claimed everyone was abusing her. We decided to try and go ahead with the reception before the actual wedding. Even if the venue could change the date, our SVIPs were already coming back, and there were only 2 months left until the date she had set. At that point, I only knew about 50 of the guests, and James knew even fewer. What hurt the most was that this would be the first time James would see me in my wedding dress. Not at our wedding, but at a party. Let's be honest, that reception was for my mother Emily's wedding anniversary, not for James and me. So James and I agreed that when we returned from Australia, we would still have our night out with our friends. On the day of the reception / my mother Emily's anniversary party, my mother arranged for separate cars to pick up James and me from home. When I arrived at the hotel, my parents, Emily and Robert, and my sister-in-law, Laura, my brother Michael's first wife, were waiting for me. I wanted to wait for James so we could enter together, but my mother Emily insisted that my father Robert should simply escort me in and that James was already socializing. I didn't even question it. My father Robert took my arm and led me into the reception room, directly into my own wedding. Yes, she had not only rebooked the reception but had also planned a wedding ceremony for James and me. She had taken the marriage license from our house. She had convinced my sister-in-law Laura to be my surprise maid of honor and my brother Michael to be James's best man, and she had convinced my father Robert that it was a good idea. None of James's family was there. None of our friends, co-workers, or anyone we knew. It had absolutely nothing to do with what we wanted. James was visibly furious. If there hadn't been so many people watching, he probably would have killed her. We plastered smiles on our faces and endured it, comforted by the thought that we could do it all over again properly in Australia. After the ceremony, now officially husband and wife, we were able to talk. I learned that my brother Michael had escorted him down the aisle less than 30 seconds before the bridal march began. It was at that moment that he realized what his now mother-in-law Emily had done. The mess she created at the reception itself is a whole other post, and we couldn't corner my mother Emily for another week. She had run off and hidden with her sister. However, she did leave us a letter saying that this was much better than a boring destination wedding and that we would thank her for it someday, and so on. It also said she had canceled our flight to Australia. Yes, she contacted the airline, pretending to be me. This was back in 1990. I don't know if that's even possible now. And she canceled our tickets. It was too late and too expensive to rebook, so we didn't have our wedding in Australia. There's a lot more to this story, but it's already super long, so I'll continue in other posts. I vaguely knew Valentine's Day was around this time, but it turns out it was yesterday and I missed it. Instead of spending the night wallowing in my apparently permanent single status, I spent it sewing the underwire back into my bra. It happens to all of us, so I thought I'd make today a re-Valentine's Day with a rant about my grandma Martha, some wine, and a Walking Dead marathon. A bit of context. My father Robert is a closet romantic, without the closet. He's the most stoic man you'd ever meet. But when it comes to my mother Emily, he's completely smitten. More often than not, he comes home with flowers, chocolates, a card, and a little gift, or something he thinks she might like. Just because. Sometimes he surprises her at work with a weekend getaway, or sometimes he just goes to give her a hug. They still send each other handwritten love letters, and it's not uncommon to find little notes from one to the other on the fridge or table. It's like they're still stuck in the honeymoon phase. My grandma Martha does not like this. Every time she visits and sees a bouquet of flowers, she demands to know who they're for, strongly implying they must be for me or one of my siblings because she's desperate for more great-grandchildren. When it's pointed out that Dad Robert gave them to Mom Emily, she demands to know what he's done wrong now. Is he cheating on her? No, he's not freaking cheating on her. He never has, and personally, I don't think he's capable. He loves my mother Emily too much, and why on earth can't he just do something nice for his wife? Why does it have to mean he did something wrong? Over the years, she has even stolen flowers and chocolates from the house when she knew they were from my father Robert to my mother Emily. The worst thing she ever stole was a small, carved wooden jewelry box that my father Robert gave my mother Emily when they got married. It was filled with all the love letters and little notes he had left her over the years. Don't worry, he bought her another one and rewrote as many as he could remember. They quickly learned not to tell my grandma Martha if they were going away for a weekend. She has booked the same trip as them more than once, and either backed out of babysitting my siblings and me at the last minute, or sometimes just a few hours after they had already left, forcing them to cancel. I'm pretty sure she does it out of jealousy. Anyway, as you can imagine, my father Robert gets a little intense on Valentine's Day. They usually go away for a few days around the 14th, but no matter what they do, my father Robert always gives my mother Emily flowers on that day. Without fail, every Valentine's Day morning, there would be a dozen red roses on the kitchen table when we woke up for school. But there were also a few other flowers on the table. Never a red rose, usually a single lily or perhaps a yellow rose with a ribbon tied to the stem and my name or one of my siblings' names, one for each of us. I don't know when my father Robert started doing this, but every year I lived with my parents, my siblings and I each received a flower from my father Robert, including my brother Michael until he hit his teens and no longer wanted flowers, so he would get a small chocolate instead. According to my grandma Martha, this is proof that my father Robert is sexually abusing us. Apparently, if a man gives a woman flowers, it means he wants sex or is thanking her for sex. The fact that he does it on Valentine's Day, the lover's holiday, only confirms it. That statement earned her very minimal contact for about a year. Update 1. I may have mentioned before that my younger brother Michael is leaving next weekend to travel around Asia for about a year. Lucky bastard. Naturally, he's been trying to see as many friends as he can before he leaves and wanted to have a going-away party. Since last weekend was the first after Valentine's Day, my parents, Emily and Robert, took off to Paris for a few days, leaving him the house to himself. So he threw a party. Nothing wild, and my parents knew about it. He just had some friends over, with music, alcohol, and food. Knowing him and his friends, they probably spent most of the time on the Xbox or whatever. Nothing was broken or destroyed, and they cleaned up before leaving. It's important to note that I wasn't there. The only reason I knew there was a party was because he called me at 4 a.m. to ask which recycling bin the gin bottle goes in. At some point, one of the guys uploaded a few party photos to social media with my brother Michael tagged. I've seen these photos. There are about 4. 2 of the group posing outside my parents' house, one of my brother Michael hugging all the alcohol, and another of everyone sitting around the TV playing video games. One of my cousins, Olivia, was visiting my grandparents, Martha and George, this morning, mentioned the party, and showed them the photos. According to my cousin Olivia, not much was said, and the conversation moved on. So why am I telling you all this? Because my grandma Martha decided to call me about half a dozen times after my cousin Olivia left. I never answer when she calls, so she left several voicemails. I've transcribed them below. Most of it was screaming. Message 1. How dare you? How dare you treat your parents' house with so little respect? I can't believe how irresponsible you've been. How could a granddaughter of mine turn out so disrespectful? You don't get that from me. How many boys have you had lurking around there? I've seen the pictures. You're just like your mother Emily, irresponsible and disrespectful. Answer the phone right now. Answer the Message 2. Answer the phone. How dare you involve your brother Michael in this? I've seen the pictures, you disrespectful and ungrateful girl. Do you want to give your grandpa George another heart attack? Is that what you want? Do you want him to die of shame from having such a disrespectful granddaughter? Just wait until I tell your parents. Message 3. If you don't answer the phone the next time I call, you better be dead in a ditch. Message 4. You're going to pay for all the damages to that house, do you hear me? I'll make sure of it. Don't go crying to your father, Robert, either. It's time you took responsibility for your actions. Your mother, Emily, lets you get away with too much. This never would have happened if you were my daughter. Update 2. Some of you know me because I comment on pretty much everything in this sub. Others might know me from my saga about a completely insane, wild mother-in-law, which, surprise, is still ongoing. I'm waiting for a few things to happen before updating to maintain anonymity. I've somewhat introduced my maternal grandma Martha in this sub, but mostly from my mother Emily's perspective. So I thought this would be the perfect way to give you a glimpse into my grandma Martha's behavior toward me without delving into years of backstory that I don't have time for right now. The context I will give you is that my grandma Martha doesn't always give gifts to her grandchildren for Christmas or our birthdays. The ones she does give, my parents, Emily and Robert, have always tried to censor, but sometimes some crap slips through. In recent years, we managed to convince my mother Emily to stop vetting the gifts before giving them to us because it just crushed her to open things from her mother meant for her children and find passive-aggressive garbage or outright trash. This wasn't an issue for the last 3 years or so because we didn't receive anything from her. Until this year. I volunteered to work on Christmas, so today was the first real chance to sit down and open gifts. I saved my grandma Martha's gift for last and took some pictures for you to follow along as I opened them. By now, you've probably guessed it's something ridiculous, or I wouldn't be making this post. So, join me as I open this interesting gift bag from my grandma Martha. It looks innocent enough, and according to the dog, I won't need the bomb squad. It appears to be small, separately wrapped items. Okay, there are 3 individually wrapped gifts. For those who didn't click on the photos, gift 1 was an open and almost empty bottle of Ribena, which I don't think shows well in the picture. It's a blackcurrant juice drink. The second gift was 6 pieces of wood, which looked like kindling. And the last gift was an open packet of strepsils, which are throat lozenges. Now, as bad as that was, my brother Michael just announced that my gift is way better than his, and he would happily trade with me. Why, you ask? What could be worse than the contents of Sarah's grandma's trash can? Did she show it? Yes, that's a skimpy Santa Mankini, for which I have no words. Edit. My grandma Martha has been insisting for years that a good Scottish country house isn't complete without a mounted deer head on the wall. My mother Emily finally gave in. Update 3. Some of you know I was staying at my parents', Emily and Robert's house for a few months while my broken ankle healed, and I've just moved back to my apartment. Well, my apartment shower can't decide if it wants to spew magma or actual ice fragments, so I'm back at my parents' house until it learns to behave. Good news for you all. My mother Emily and I realized we started telling the story of her wedding months ago and never finished it. Again, I'll be writing this from my mother Emily's perspective, and she'll answer questions too. Remember that at this point, neither of my parents knew their destination wedding had been canceled. The ceremony and reception were held in the same building. The ceremony in the hotel's function room and the reception in the ballroom. It turned out these rooms were directly across from each other, separated by a hallway. So, as my new husband James and I were ushered back down the aisle with about 100 people throwing confetti at us, we literally exited one room, crossed the hall, and entered the ballroom, which was already filled with the other 300 or so invited guests. We didn't have a single moment alone or a chance to corner my mother Emily before we were pushed into the party, which was probably her plan. If we had paused for a second, we probably would have decided to leave. Instead, we were pushed directly onto the dance floor for our first dance. At that point, I was able to talk to James and learned that my brother Michael had escorted him down the aisle seconds before the bridal march. He didn't even realize it was a wedding aisle until he heard the music and saw me coming towards him. I don't really remember our first dance, although I do have a picture. In fact, it's the only photo we have of us at our wedding. And even though I hated my wedding, I absolutely adore that photo. Sarah here. It's a really great candid shot. My mother Emily is looking towards the person who took the photo, and my father Robert is just looking at my mother Emily. It's one of those he's completely in love with her photos. I want to post it, but it wouldn't make sense if I blurred out their faces. I have no idea where my mother Emily was during my first dance, or for the hour or so after the wedding. James and I assumed she was hiding somewhere, so we just kept dancing with each other, partly to calm ourselves down and partly to keep everyone from trying to talk to us. Every time someone congratulated us, I wanted to cry. I only remember James whispering to me that this wasn't our wedding that we would truly get married in Australia in a few weeks, and that would be our real wedding. About an hour later, the DJ, yes, DJ, I wanted a Saley, but of course that didn't happen, asked everyone to clear the floor for the guests of honor. James and I were quite confused. We had already had our first dance. Were there speeches or something? The ballroom doors opened again, and amidst thunderous applause and a smoke machine, my parents, Emily and Robert, entered the room. There was a bang as some flares were lit, and balloons, streamers, and confetti fell from the ceiling, balloons that read "Happy 35 years of marriage." And my mother Emily was wearing a white wedding dress. This was apparently the breaking point for both James and me. I burst into tears, and James pulled me out of the room. We did what we should have done as soon as we arrived. We left. When we got home, we found my mother Emily's letter telling us that what she had done was much better than a bad destination wedding. And she was so sure we'd love it that she had canceled our tickets to Australia. I had to physically sit on James to keep him from going back to the hotel to kill her. We later found out that my mother Emily had told people I desperately wanted to get married on her wedding anniversary as a way to honor them. My father Robert and my brother Michael, though Michael didn't really care, were told that James was pushing for the destination wedding and that I really wanted to get married in the US. It was basically sold to them as we would have our surprise wedding and a small reception, and then the party was my parents' anniversary party, and that, of course, James and I would be perfectly fine with that. I know there will be a lot of hate for my enabler, Father Robert, but he truly believes my mother Emily is always trying to make the best decision for everyone. He has no idea about many of the things she has done, and I was always terrified to tell him in case it gave him another heart attack. He had already had 3 by then, and my mother Emily blamed me for all 3, the first one when I was 10. So that was my wedding and reception. Aside from my husband James, my dress, and my father Robert walking me down the aisle, I didn't have a single thing I wanted. I also didn't have a cake, toasts, or a photographer. And about 2 weeks later, we were sent a bill for our half of the party. We didn't pay anything and remained no contact until the following summer when I found out I was pregnant with my first child. Update 4. My birthday was on the 15th, and I spent the day at work and then went out with friends, so I didn't see my parents, Emily and Robert, that day. Normally it's fine. My parents text or call me on the actual day, but they don't mind not seeing me. This year has been a bit different because my brother Michael left the country about 2 weeks ago, so 3 of the 4 children are living on the other side of the world, and my mother Emily isn't taking it particularly well. I miss them too, so it's getting on my nerves more than usual. Anyway, I agreed to see my parents, Emily and Robert, this weekend, and we would have dinner and cake to make everyone feel a little better. I love carrot cake, so my mother Emily made a carrot birthday cake. After dinner, I did my duty and let them sing Happy Birthday and blew out the candles. We were too full from dinner, so we decided to eat the cake later. About half an hour later, my grandparents, Martha and George, showed up unannounced. Generally, things were fine, with only minor annoying shenanigans from Grandma Martha. Then my grandpa George wanted a closer look at the new entryway my parents, Emily and Robert, had installed. So we all went outside to see the new security gate and cattle grid, etc., except for Grandma Martha, who decided to wait inside because it was too cold out. Fair enough, but I didn't stay with her. I went to look at the gravel. They left not long after. I stayed for another half hour before getting ready to leave myself. I went to get my cake and it was gone. Nowhere to be found. The old hag stole my birthday cake. So my mother Emily texted my grandma Martha, "Did you take Sarah's birthday cake?" And she replied, "I thought that was our share." Our share, this shameless old woman says. It wasn't even cut. An entire cake is not your share. You didn't even ask, you just took it, you shriveled nut. Don't worry, I went and stole it back. Update 5. One day, I couldn't stop throwing up at school, so my mother Emily came to pick me up. We stopped by my grandparents, Martha and George's, house on the way home for some reason, and I ran inside to throw up. As I was heading to vomit, I said something like, "Ugh, that smells awful," referring to the lamb they were cooking. When I came back out, my grandma Martha was yelling and crying at my mother Emily, calling her a bad mother because obviously I was pregnant. I was 8 years old. Update 6. I just realized it's my cake day. I can't believe I've been annoying the masses for a whole year. A lot has happened in the last year, and this sub has been there for most of it, so I want to take a moment to thank you all for your support, kind words, and funny comments. Secondly, for those who aren't caught up, Pluty Damplins is my maternal Grandma Martha, which is ironic because it's a typical warm, comforting Scottish dessert, everything she is not. She's the same Grandma Martha who ruined my parents' destination wedding, gave extremely weird Christmas gifts, tasted my birthday cake, and thought I was pregnant at 8 years old. I've posted more about her, but this post is about the first time she almost killed me. Yes, it's happened more than once. I was one of those babies who could sleep through the apocalypse. This hasn't changed. I slept like a log from day one and rarely woke up on my own when I was hungry. Instead, I had to be woken up every few hours to be fed. I'm not 100% sure what the current parenting advice is, but when Pluty had children, the advice seemed to be, never wake a sleeping baby. Let them sleep as long as possible. If they need something, they'll wake up on their own. When I was about 3 months old, my parents, Emily and Robert, left me with Pluty for the first and last time one night while they went to a wedding. They fed me mid-morning before they left, and Pluty says she fed me again in the evening before putting me down for a nap. My parents' instructions were clear. Wake Sarah every X hours and feed her. But Pluty knows better. Pluty raised 2 children, and we all know that the ability to push a human out of your vagina and then not kill it makes you a certified pediatrician. So she didn't wake me, and I didn't wake up on my own. The next morning, my parents, Emily and Robert, arrived to pick me up, and I was still asleep. According to my father, Robert, Pluty was bragging about what a good baby I had been for her, how I had slept through the night and hadn't cried or complained once. Well, there was a damn good reason for that. I was in a coma. She had left me for so long, we still don't know how long, that I had become severely dehydrated and hypoglycemic, to the point where I barely reacted to painful stimuli. My parents rushed me to the hospital and I turned out fine. Well, that's debatable, but there was no long-term damage or evidence of seizures. While my parents, Emily and Robert, were at the hospital taking care of me, Pluty went into self-preservation mode. She told as many people as she could, including her husband, my Grandpa George, who wasn't there that night, that I was in a coma and could have brain damage because my mother Emily had dropped me and hit my head. Then she went to hide with her sister in England for over a month. My Grandpa George and quite a few members of my extended family still believe Pluty's story to this day. He still jokes that the things I do are because I was dropped on my head. Update 7. If you didn't read my last post, I basically went to my parents' house for the birthday cake over the weekend. My grandparents, Martha and George, showed up, and while we were all outside looking at the shiny new gravel, my Grandma Martha stole my birthday cake. I then went and stole it back and didn't hear from anyone for the rest of the night. The next day, she sent me a message. My phone doesn't get along with the internet, so I've had to transcribe it here. Grandma Martha. Don't you ever break into my house again. I had no idea who was there. You're lucky I didn't call the police. You scared your Grandpa George too. He almost had another heart attack. He could have died, and it would have been your fault. Me. You saw me walk through the house, Grandma Martha. I don't care. Grandma Martha. Rude, rude, rude. And you also stole Alex's birthday cake. It wasn't yours. I didn't take your cake. Those are lies your mother Emily is spreading. I spent hours making that cake for Alex. Are you going to replace that cake, child? Me. How curious. The cake I took said, Happy Birthday, Sarah, which doesn't even sound like Alex. Plus, it had candle holes and was in a container with my parents' last name, which isn't her last name, written on it. I haven't heard from her since. This morning, I got a message from my father, Robert. Dad, just a heads up. Your grandmother is telling people you stole money from her on Saturday. We're handling it. Which basically means she ran off to tell my Uncle Daniel or my elder cousin Alex, who is exactly like her. And instead of talking to me, they ran to tell my parents, Emily and Robert. Also, I haven't decided on a name for this particular nut job. Someone suggested the Witch of Kirkcaldy. And I like the idea of incorporating a Scottish place name or a historical Scottish villain into her nickname. Another person suggested Allen's Bitch, a play on the Scottish town, Bridge of Allen, which isn't far from where she used to live. Or I could name her after the Loch Ness Monster or something similar. What do people think? Edit. A comment made me think, so I did a mini Facebook stalking session of the person she said she was going to give my cake to. His birthday isn't until May. Now, whether that means she genuinely forgot and planned to use my cake as if she'd made it herself, or if she knew and just pulled a name out of her butt hoping I wouldn't find out, I don't know. And frankly, I don't care. Both are lies. Both are Update 8. I know I've been gone for a while. An old post of mine went viral, so I was hiding, trying not to attract trolls to this sub. I don't know how well that worked. I want to give a huge thank you to those who messaged me to let me know my post was spreading across the internet. I've received a few very sick private messages asking me to send them some pretty weird photos of myself. So, to recap, Pluty is my maternal grandma Martha. She seems like some kind of evil wrapped in a human skin suit, and I actively hate her. She's the one who gives beyond horrible Christmas gifts, including a Christmas mankini to my brother Michael and a rock to me. She asked me for inappropriate photos from my job. I work as a forensic scientist. She reported me missing during the Grenfell Tower fire. She stole my birthday cake. That seems to be the story that pushed people over the edge. And she orchestrated a surprise wedding for my parents, Emily and Robert, which was much worse than it sounds. I've been no contact with her for a few months, but with all the family drama going on, I don't even think she's noticed. She has 6 grandchildren, and pulled, or tried to pull, something at each birth. I'm going to tell all 6 stories as separate posts, but I'll try to write them as standalone pieces so you don't have to read them all to understand. This is the story of the birth of the first grandchild, my eldest cousin Olivia, the golden child of her golden child. Pluty doesn't give a damn what anyone thinks of her. Calling her out in public doesn't work. She either laughs it off or twists and manipulates things to make you seem exaggerated, a liar, or crazy. It's just another opportunity to attack. But it wasn't always like this. When her oldest and only son, my Uncle Daniel, got married, she apparently did care what his new daughter-in-law's family thought. Both Pluty's family and her new DIL's family were, and still are, very well known and respected in their area. It's like living in a small town where the high school principal's daughter marries the pastor's son. That kind of thing, everyone knows them. My Uncle Daniel and his first wife, Olivia's mother, were high school sweethearts, so both families had known each other for a long time. Aside from wearing a funeral outfit, including a black veil, to their wedding, Pluty managed to hide her craziness from them. Leading up to the birth of their first child, her daughter-in-law had decided she only wanted her husband, Uncle Daniel, and her own mother in the delivery room. This was long before cell phones, so the plan was that when the time came, the DIL would call her mother and tell her they were going to the hospital, and her mother would inform the rest while waiting by the phone. When it was close to delivery time, the DIL would call her mother from the hospital to come. Pluty was not happy. Oh, she was all understanding and sweet with the DIL's parents, and she made soft complaints about the decision to the DIL and her son, Uncle Daniel, but she spent almost the entire pregnancy ranting and complaining to my mother, Emily. My mother, Emily, being naive, said that Pluty could be in the room when she had her first baby. Pluty scoffed and told her it wouldn't be the same and that she didn't care about my mother, Emily's first baby. This was before my parents' wedding saga, for those who read that. The day arrives. The DIL and my Uncle Daniel call her mother and head to the hospital. The DIL's mother calls Pluty and her husband, my Grandpa George, and my parents, Emily and Robert, and everyone gathers at the DIL's parents' house to await news. After a few hours, the women are preparing dinner while the men are already well served, the grandfather celebrating the birth of the first grandchild, and my father, Robert, who is American-Scottish, born in Australia, just helping out. Then the phone rings. Pluty offers to answer because the DIL's mother is busy. Everyone is in the room, so they hear Pluty's side of the conversation, which is basically, "Yes, she's busy right now. Okay, I'll tell her." And she hangs up. She tells them it was a mutual friend of hers and the DIL's mother, canceling some plan. A few minutes later, she excuses herself, saying she's going to stop by her house for a moment to check her answering machine. I think we can all guess what really happened. Yes, it was the DIL calling to tell her mother to come to the hospital because it was almost time for the DIL to push. Instead of relaying the message, Pluty lied and went to the hospital herself. When she arrived, she told the nursing station she was the DIL's mother, and they let her through. Everyone was too distracted to ask her why she was there and where the actual mother was, so she got what she wanted, a front row seat to the birth of her first grandchild. Update 9. I don't know why I'm surprised. Actually, no, I am, but also yes. I don't know anymore. I'm just angry. Anyway, context for those new to the special brand of batshit crazy I bring to this sub. Pluty is my maternal grandma Martha. She is literally a demon in a human skin suit she stole from some poor, unfortunate soul. I was no contact with her, though I don't think she would have noticed, but I've had to break it right now. I don't remember exactly what I've posted. I had my wisdom teeth removed a few days ago, so I'm sore and exhausted on top of all this. The big story that really angered people was about 2 years ago when she stole my birthday cake. That story was the one that finally pushed everyone over the edge. In this sub, you don't mess with cake. So last week, I was visiting my parents, Emily and Robert, when the landline rang. The landline never rings. No one uses it anymore. The only one who calls there besides companies trying to sell you something is Pluty. My mother Emily answers, and the only thing I hear her say is, "Did you call an ambulance?" And I instantly went into emergency mode. We raced over to my grandparents, Martha and George's house. My mother Emily tells me Pluty thinks my grandpa George is having a heart attack. We arrived moments after the ambulance, helped them get in, and found my grandpa George in the kitchen. Only Pluty wasn't there. The paramedics stabilized him, and my mother Emily went with him in the ambulance. Meanwhile, I called everyone who needed to be informed. I looked for Pluty and kept driving. Finally, I found her, and we headed to the hospital. Guess where she was? Visiting a friend 2 blocks away. She was on the phone with that friend and heard my grandpa George call out. So she hung up on the friend, called an ambulance, called my mother Emily, and then went to her friend's house to apologize for hanging up. She left her husband of over 60 years, scared and alone, having a heart attack and possibly dying in his kitchen, to go see a friend she sees every day and who would have perfectly understood. And it gets worse. We arrived at the hospital, and I dropped her off at the entrance before looking for parking. When I returned to the entrance, she was gone. So I assumed she went to find my mother Emily and, I don't know, her potentially dying husband. Not a chance. She had gone to wander around the maternity ward. I missed exactly what she was doing, but hospital security had to escort her back to the waiting room twice. Since my grandpa George has Alzheimer's and my mother Emily has power of attorney, my mother was allowed to be with him in the assessment room while he was being treated, and they waited for the doctor. My father Robert was in London at the time, and the other family members I called who were close enough to help me wrangle the goblin, my uncle Daniel, his wife, 2 cousins Alex and Chloe, and their partners, said they were busy but to keep them updated. So I was left alone trying to balance everything, waiting outside the unit for updates, calling everyone to inform them. I had to go outside because in this damn hospital, there's no damn signal. And also finding the literal demon before she sucked the soul out of a newborn or found another skin suit. A few hours later, he was moved to cardiology, and we were told it was a very mild heart attack. He's fine, but they want to keep him for observation. So I got my mother Emily sorted out. She has terrible sciatica right now, can't drive, limps everywhere, and almost burst into tears when the adrenaline wore off. I symbolically kicked Pluty into the car, and we went home. In the car, Pluty called my uncle Daniel, and it was so scary, and I just wanted to stay at the hospital with him. Get lost, you disfigured trash goblin. I was speeding from pure rage, my mother Emily trying to calm Pluty down, and Pluty squeezing out what might be considered tears, but I don't think Satan's semen counts. Anyway, we took her home, and I was forcibly volunteered to pick her up the next morning for early visiting hours. I told my mother Emily exactly what Pluty had been doing for the last few hours, including where she was when we arrived and why. We argued a bit because my mother Emily tried to defend her a lot. She doesn't handle emergencies like us, and she was in a panic. Yeah, right, whatever you say. But anyway, we saw my grandpa George the next day. He's fine. Pluty is whining over him and overacting for all the nurses. I think I made my throat bleed from huffing so much. They want to keep him a bit longer because he's got a UTI. He's on antibiotics. They don't think he's in danger, but he needs to rest, so he's staying admitted, although they're moving him from cardiology to a normal medical ward. Nothing terrifying. Keep that in mind. The next day, I had my wisdom teeth removed under general anesthesia at the same hospital, so I didn't have to deal with her for a while. The day after that, when I came back to the world with less brain fog, my mother Emily told me what happened while I was out. The original plan was for Pluty to drive my mother Emily and me to the hospital so that she and my mother Emily could visit my grandpa George while I was spaced out, and then she would drive us home because my mother Emily can't drive well now due to her sciatica, and I was going to be pretty messed up. She decided to go shopping with the girls and told us about it like 3 minutes before we had to leave. So, I drove with my mother Emily, and we decided to see what happened. If her sciatica allowed her to drive, fine. If not, we'd use Uber. I went to get my teeth pulled, and my mother Emily went to see her father. She had barely been there 5 minutes when 2 of her cousins, Alex and Chloe, came rushing in. Context. Pluty is the youngest of like 1,000 siblings. I don't know, she has a ton of sisters, I think 10 or something. Every single one of her siblings, except for the youngest, who lied about his age and ran off to the Navy at 14, the smartest of the lot, are exactly like her. Some worse, some milder, but all subworthy. I could write books about what these women have done to their own families and the world in general, but it probably goes against the rules, and I don't have the time stone. Pluty's oldest sister was the one she was closest to and undoubtedly the worst. She was physically abusive to her husband and children, and there's a more than slightly possibility that she murdered her husband. She's dead now, but her son, her scapegoat, is an incredible man. He knows exactly what his mother was like and has figured out what Pluty is like. I also think I mentioned him a while ago. He's the one who used to visit Pluty and my grandpa George and would extend invitations to us for things through her. Big things. Trips to Abu Dhabi, he lives there, Wimbledon tickets, Formula One, etc. And Pluty always turned them down without telling us, telling him we were busy or whatever. She would also call us the day after he had visited and say, "He's gone now." She never told us when he was coming until he was already gone. A few years ago, he ran into my father, Robert, at a conference in France and directly asked him, "Do you have a problem with me?" And that's when everything came out. So now he mails us when he's back in the UK. My parents, Emily and Robert, have gone to Abu Dhabi with him. He's been traveling around the US, and he even made a special trip to the UK when he knew I was coming to the US for a few weeks, just so I could ask him everything. He also gave me contacts there. These past few years have been great for getting to know extended family because, let's be realistic, nobody in my family talks to each other. These women kept all their children isolated from each other. And now that the children are dying off, in quotes because many are already in their 50s, they're starting to reconnect and discover things. Sarah's parents didn't exclude me from their wedding. Pluty crushed everything like Godzilla on crack. Anyway, there's this male cousin, Alex, and a female cousin, Chloe. Their mother also died, and she was another horrible mother. She wouldn't let Chloe do anything. I don't know much about her situation, but I do know her mother lived with her entire life. And 3 or 4 days after her mother died, she got married and moved to India. Well, Alex and Chloe came rushing in, asking 1,000 questions, and were very surprised to see my grandpa George sitting there eating, conscious and everything. It's a 2-bedroom, nurses bustling around, and them with their luggage. My mother Emily calmed them down. They talked a bit with my grandpa George, and then they went to the cafeteria to figure out what the heck was going on. It turns out Pluty had called them and told them my grandpa George was on his deathbed. According to her, he was in a coma, and they were talking about turning off the machines. So if they wanted to say goodbye, they had to come now. Both Alex and Chloe dropped everything and flew, thinking he was about to die. Alex flew from Abu Dhabi and Chloe from India, and somehow they ended up at the same baggage claim and went straight to the hospital together. In the end, they drove my mother Emily and me home, which I vaguely remember but thought I was dreaming. They're still here, staying at my parents' house. My male cousin Alex is fuming and called Pluty to yell at her. I missed it. Damn tooth fairies. My grandma Martha doesn't remember saying that, to which my mother Emily has finally put her foot down and told her she's booked her another appointment at the memory clinic, because this memory loss is very concerning and needs to be addressed. Pluty scoffed. She does that thing where she pouts and crosses her arms while saying, "I'm going to throw a tantrum now like a monkey." Well, good riddance, witch. I really hope my mother Emily and these 2 cousins, Alex and Chloe, connect more over having such horrible mothers, and that my mother Emily starts growing more of a spine to deal with Pluty. Sarah stopped posting 8 years ago after receiving the following messages and reporting them. Hello, beautiful. I came across your story on Facebook. Hilarious, by the way, and I can't stop thinking about your hair. I made this account just to contact you. This might seem a little creepy, but it's totally innocent, I swear. And no one else will see this, just me. But I have a request for you. Could you send me photos of your hair? I don't want many. Just one with your hair loose and all curly falling down your back, another with your hair completely loose down your back, and another with your hair all wet covering your breasts, but with your nipples showing through. I'm willing to pay you for these photos, $50 each, and I promise I won't post them. Although that's a very generous offer, I'm afraid I'm going to have to decline. I'm sorry, but I'm not comfortable fulfilling your request. Hello again, beautiful. I understand your response, I really do, but I'm not a pervert. I'm not going to spread them online. I just want some pictures, please, $100 each. Again, no, I'm sorry. Regardless of your intentions, that's not something I'm going to do. The same person offers $1,000 for a photo, only here he details a few things that are not appropriate for YouTube.